This is Daniel with Holistic Solutions. Today we're going to be doing a educational video on shoulder mobility, posture, how to fix the most common types of shoulder malfunctions that I see. Now, primarily what we see in here is, in terms of shoulder immobility, is a lack of the ability to externally rotate and upward mobility. And primarily those problems are caused by muscle imbalances. So a lot of times people will get, bursitis and torn rotator cuff muscles, but all of that stuff stems from the initial muscle imbalance. So primarily what happens is our lats, this muscle that inserts itself here into our humerus, and then it comes down and inserts on what we call our thoracolumbar aponeurosis down here. That muscle becomes shortened, right? And it pulls my shoulder down and rotates forward. And I'm sure you've seen people kind of doing like this type of thing. And those people all have shortened lats, right? So one of the first things we want to do is take care of that problem. Another thing you'll notice is my pec runs into here, into my acromion, and it also can start to pull that shoulder forward. And then you'll also notice when I do that this trapezius muscle starts to lift up and wing as well. So a lot of these muscles become shortened, and then what will happen is the muscles back here on my rhomboids and the lower portion of my trapezius will become overly lengthened, right? So if I have a muscle that's overly lengthened and it goes to contract, it might not be able to grab its muscle fibers and actually do what it's supposed to do. And then if I've got these muscles in here that are too short, then they have nowhere to go. So I want all my muscles to be in this range, right? So that they have some place to go, but that they're not too far apart that they can't grab each other. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a foam roller, and I'm going to myofascially release my lats, my pecs, and my traps. All right, so let's start with the lats first. When I do a myofascial release, basically what I want to do is I just kind of want to find the short areas of that muscle and the areas that feel like they're really tightly banded together and just kind of rest on them. A lot of times when I see people doing myofascial release or foam rolling, they'll move too much. So I just kind of want to find a nice juicy area and just kind of sink into that area and then maybe try to stretch it out a little bit while I'm pressing into the tissue. All right, so I'll slowly go through this. Kind of pushing myself up here. I can readjust. Yeah, get that nice thoracolumbar aponeurosis portion down there in the lower back. Just kind of rest there a little bit. Now for me, I've got really good mobility, so this is easy for me, but for you, this might take a little while. You might have to spend a couple minutes just sitting on one spot. And that's okay. And make sure I get up into the shoulder really good. All right, so like I said, for me, I don't spend a whole lot of doing this because I've already got really mobile scapulas. I can also use a ball like this, and I can get the inner portion of my subscapularis and my lats all up in here by kind of leaning into a wall. All right, so I can do a little self-massage in that way. And I'm also stretching my lats and my subscap and all that while I'm doing this. All right, so go ahead and take a few minutes to release your lats. And then when you're done with that, we'll move on to the pectoral muscles in here. All right, so they can you got your pec minor, which inserts here and then comes down onto the various ribs, and then you got your pec major, which does this kind of thing, and it comes across and bands in here. But pretty much in general, we want to work on external rotation in order to stretch the pec out, and we want to work on pressing into it to get that myofascial release. So I'll use the ball for this one again, and I will just press into it and then externally rotate my arm. So so you can see a little better, I'm pressing into the wall and then I'm externally rotating my arm. My thumb starts this way and then it winds up pointing back behind me as I open my shoulder up. That'll release this in here. as I press in. And once again, I want to spend a couple minutes doing this, because the more loose that this is, the better off our corrective exercise is going to be when we go to do that. Taking nice, big, full, deep breaths up into your rib cage can really help to facilitate the release of those muscles. So really try to remember to take deep breaths. If you don't breathe, your muscles will also kind of tensen up a little bit. All right, so take a couple minutes, try to get into the pec there, and release all of this so that we can externally rotate our arms. So now we're partially through this myofascial release portion. So we started with our lats, and now we got the pec, and now we got to get the trapezius as well. So the trapezius is pretty easy. I'm just going to take the ball on the inside of the door here. I'm just going to lean into it. And I can stretch my neck. So while I press into it, I can stretch my neck this way, and I can bring my shoulder down and back, and that'll facilitate the stretching of the trapezius up here as I'm pressing into it with the ball. All right, then of course you're going to want to do the other side as well. I didn't show you that, but that kind of goes without saying that you should release, both sides at the same time. All right, so once you're done your myofascial release, then you can do a really good stretch. And one of my favorite stretches is using the pull-up bar. And for stretching our lats, there's really not a whole lot better of a tool, because really all I have to do is just hang from the bar and let my body weight hang, and I'm going to start to stretch that lat. And then if I want something even deeper to each side, I'll just tilt my body to the side like this, as I'm kind of gripping, and then that'll lengthen this side more. And then if I want to stretch my right lat more, I just curve my body over this way. And I can use this technique also. I can lean back, I can stretch out my abdominals and my obliques, and all of that stuff being lengthened will certainly help with the crushed rib cage appearance. The more that you're able to stretch here and lengthen here, the easier it's going to be to bring yourself into extension. So that's and I'll show you the same. I'll show you the same view from what it looks like from the back. Stretching the lats. All right, so take a couple of minutes and try to lengthen the lats. And then we're going to go on to our next corrective exercise. So we've really done a good job of lengthening everything using these stretching and myofascial release techniques. Now it's time to work on toning up those rhomboid muscles and the shortened, and to get more tone in the lower portion of the trapezius. So one of the best ways to do that is, once again, using the pull-up bar. You can start with that stretching state and then bring your shoulder blades down and back. And it's going to look like this. All right, so what that's going to do is that's going to build tone in between the shoulder blades, bring the shoulder blades down and back. So once the shoulder blade is down and back, it'll make it easier for me to bring my arm up over my head, like so. Whereas if my shoulder blades are up and rounded, now when I go to push my arm up, my arm doesn't want to go up. There's just that bone is in the way. So I have to create space by bringing my shoulder blade down and back, and now my arm will finish going up the rest of the way. One regression for this is some people might not be able to do a pull-up or even hold themselves from the bar. So you can use a flexi band like this, and you can hang it from the bar like so. All right, and that will also build tone there, but it won't be as difficult. So if you're not currently able to pull yourself up by your scapulas, start with something like this band. Another really cool, useful aspect of the band is you can do it without the doorway as well. So if I want to work on external rotation, I could start with my thumbs pointing toward each other and then just externally rotate my arms while I'm carrying the band. And this will strengthen the aspect of my shoulder that wants to go like this. So I'm going to have more tone doing this than I am doing this. So that'll be a good exercise to balance the shoulder just by simply externally rotating. And then you could do progressions with this as well. The more slack I give myself, the easier it will become. And if I want to use more force, I just hold my hands closer together. All right, so that's a really good set of exercises, and I'll show you from the back as well. All right, so these exercises are more designed to build tone in those muscles, but then you also have to retrain your body neuromuscularly to do some things properly. Like, so for instance, I might tone those muscles up, but then when I go to actually do this function, I might have a tendency to bring my scapula up. So a lot of people, as they go to lift their arm up, they pull their shoulder up like this. But that's automatically bringing my shoulder a little bit forward, right? So if I practice extending my arm and keeping my shoulder blade down and back, and you can do this in a mirror, just look for the clavicle here, make sure that it doesn't rise. If you see it coming up like this in the mirror as you go to press your arm up, then you know that you're doing it wrong. But if you can keep your shoulder blades down and back and then slowly press up, you're going to feel a good deal of burn in your deltoid, because that's where you're going to be lifting your arm up from. You're also probably going to feel a little more stretch in your lats and in these pecs, because you're probably not going to be used to doing it quite like this at first. But once you get really good at this motion, then you'll have completely restored neuromuscular function to your shoulder, and then your shoulders will start to look more like this and less like this. If you wanted to add another progression onto that, you could add a banded exercise, such as this one. And we can keep my shoulder blade down and back, press up. And that is somewhat difficult even for me. So you might have to start off with no weight at all, and then gradually progress to using more and more weight. You can also do this with dumbbells as well. All right, so there's a lot of exercises, various to that situation, that can help strengthen your rhomboids. So I'm just going to go over a couple more of those. Using these bands really effective. We can kind of turn this band in a loop like this, and then I could just do exercises like I'm drawing a bow. That's also really going to strengthen that scapula there. And then I can switch to the other side, strengthen this one. All right, that'll help to keep those scapulas nice and flat against their back instead of being winged like this, right? Another couple of cool exercises that you can do. Might involve doing like a type of rowing exercise. So one of my favorite exercises to do is this one here. I will just pull and rotate. All right, so I'm just rotating and bringing my arm back something like this. That's a good way to prime your rhomboid muscles to stay and keep your shoulder blade down and back. And then when you go to do your pressing exercises, let's say if I want to do a bench press or press like this, I'd have to keep my shoulder blade down and back as I go to do this exercise. And that will actually keep my shoulder blade open so that when I go to do my presses, I'll actually be working my pec. I'll make my pec bigger. Whereas if I were to not have my shoulder blade down and back and I allowed my shoulder to come forward, now if I'm going to press, my pec is already in a shortened state. So I'm actually not even developing my pec if I'm doing push-ups like this. You know what I mean? If any type of this type of situation in which I go to do a push-up, I'm not even working my pecs. I'm just basically working my triceps. But if I bring my shoulder blades down and back and then I go to a push-up, look how open my chest is. I'm really going to be working that function there. So that's another really good technique just in general. So start with your rowing type of exercises. Build some tone. Get those muscles in your back stronger. And then when you go to work your pecs, then you'll get more progression out of that as well. Another thing I wanted to talk about was a lot of people have problems with their kyphosis. So this is something I encounter more with people who are generally a little older, but it does affect people who are younger as well. And so this is a type of scoliosis called a kyphosis, where you have a rounded type of spine like this. And this is a problem because it crushes this portion of our anterior oblique sling and crushes our rib cage. It makes breathing a little bit more difficult. It loses mobility as we try to rotate. So we really want to open this up. So basically, I want to do that. Right? I want to take all this tissue in here that's shortened, and I want to open it up. Just like when we did this exercise, and we were stretching, and I had you stretch out your abdominals, right? So that will help to open that up. And then all you have to do is draw your belly button up and in. And you can practice releasing some of this tissue in here as well by just simply taking your own hands and sort of slightly digging them underneath of your rib cage and pressing into here. That'll help to loosen up some of that tissue, and you can do something like this. And you'll notice when I draw my belly button up in how straight my thoracic spine becomes, right? And that's going to make it easier for me to bring my shoulder blades down and back. If my rib cage is collapsed like so, I might find it more difficult to bring my shoulder blades down and back. Also, you'll notice things like forward head posture, going like this. If I have a collapsed rib cage and then I try to bring my head up, you'll notice how my voice almost like cuts off. But if I do this now and I still keep my chin down and back, now it's a lot easier for me to speak. You can actually hear the difference in my voice. So once again, important to keep this open, keep your shoulder blades down and back, and from a postural standpoint, that's going to put you in the best position, in terms of upward mobility, in terms of your pressing, and in terms of being able to pull and rotate your body. These things are all of key importance. So go ahead and continue to practice this shoulder mobility. Make sure you do your myofascial release first, then stretch, and then you can do your corrective exercise. Focus first on the exercises that are going to tone your rhomboids and your traps in your back, and then you can do, while you have those areas toned, then you can do your pressing exercises upwards and forwards. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Have a nice day.